2023 has released some of the best cards in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh, but which ones are the best? What's Potion? You got Matt here, and welcome back to another competitive Yu-Gi-Oh video. Another year in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh has come and gone, and with it came some insanely good cards, but also some pretty bad ones. But we're focusing on the positive today to find out which are the 10 best cards that were released in the Yu-Gi-Oh TCG in 2023. So if you're excited for the video, then make sure to smash the like button. If this video hits 150 likes, then I'll bring you a guide to every single card you're going to need for the 2024 competitive season. Also, if you like deck profiles, combo guides, meta discussions, and competitive Yu-Gi-Oh videos just like this one, you're gonna love this channel. So make sure to subscribe and help us reach our new goal of 5,000 subscribers. That being said, here are the top 10 best Yu-Gi-Oh cards released in 2023. Let's jump into it. So before I get to the list, we have to determine what the criteria is we're looking at. Basically, it's going to be answering the question of what makes a card good. There are a ton of ways for cards to be considered good in Yu-Gi-Oh today, but what I'm looking for this video is at least one of these 4 categories. It either has to increase consistency while giving additional advantages, significantly boost the power level or ceiling of a deck or engine, or took an existing deck or archetype to top tier status, has at least some amount of competitive success. If the card hasn't topped a YCS, then it probably won't be on this list. Or it's an incredibly powerful standalone card seeing play in many decks. Also, I think the best way for me to do this is to limit the list to 1 card per archetype. That way we want the same card popping up over and over. I went through every single set and added cards that I thought were possibly deserving of making this list, and I ended up with over 20 of them, but I managed to cut it down to just 10. So with that being said, now we have our criteria, let's jump into it with number 10. At number 10, we have Expurrely Noir. Now, when Purely first came out, everyone had hyped it up quite a bit because it was a very cute archetype of this set, and one of the cutest archetypes of all time, but didn't really see much competitive success until we got the release of Purely Sleepy Memory. The deck was poised to be one of the best of the format, so Konami preemptively hit the strategy, making it less consistent. The deck has other win conditions, but let's be honest, there's only 2 things going through an opponent's mind when they're playing against Purely. The first of which is going to be, how do I beat Expurrely Noir? And the second is, how do I stop them from getting to Expurrely Noir in the first place? The deck is so powerful that players were siding in cards like Herald of the Abyss and Xyz Encore to handle exclusively Purely endboards, which you know is a problem when cards are being sided that are that hyper-specific for a strategy. Noir being a massive Towers-esque card is annoying enough, but also having non-destruction form of removal is so deadly for this card. And for that reason, just because Noir is such an absolute pain to out, this card deserves to be one of the top 10 cards of 2023. At number 9, we have Rescue Ace Hydrant. Now listen, Amazing Defenders might go down as one of the best deck building sets of all time, with the fact that all 3 archetypes in it had actually topped a YCS, or won a YCS I should say. Granted, Rescue Ace only started seeing a lot of success once we got Duelist Nexus and the release of Emergency and Preventer, but neither of those cards are as impactful to the strategy as Rescue Ace Hydrant is. I would argue that Rescue Ace has been the best deck over the past 2 to 3 months of the format, partly because of the Sinful Spoils engine, but also because the Rescue Ace engine itself is so compact and powerful. When looking at our criteria, Rescue Ace Hydrant does pretty much everything we want to do. It has competitive success, but it also increases the consistency of the strategy by getting you access to a new Rescue Ace monster every single turn, and it definitely boosts the power level of the deck because all the trap cards and spell cards do something a bit better, get a bonus effect when Rescue Ace Hydrant is on the field. Was the card amazing on release? Not really, but with all the support we knew we were going to be getting, the card shot up in price and became definitely one of the most hyped cards and best cards of the year in 2023. At number 8, we have Imsety, Glory of Horus. Now, while Kingstar Cophius might be the card that the entire engine revolves around, the reason why the deck actually works well and the engine works as well as it does is because of Imsety being a searcher and being by just nature a +1 in card advantage. Not only is Imsety able to replace itself by getting Kingstar Cophius and also drawing a card and summoning itself out to the field, the fact that you're discarding or sending a card to the graveyard is actually really good for the majority of strategies that are incorporating the Horus engine. Sending that extra card to the graveyard with Imsety is absolutely critical because you can set up your additional engine with the strategy. Imagine sending a Phantom Knight's name in PK, or sending even a tier name or even a Miller. That can be absolutely critical to getting your full deck online. And even with all that being said, I didn't even mention that the card itself is non-targeting removal as well if another card leaves your field by an opponent's card effect. Also, as a level 8, it opens up easy access to the level 10 Synchro pool with level 2 tuners, and of course to the rank 8 Xyz pool, which is really strong in this format. I wanted to put Imsety higher up on the list because it was able to help bring tier 1s back to being one of the best decks of the format, while also making PK one of the stronger decks in tier 2 as well. It can see play in a ton of different strategies because pretty much everything that loves using the graveyard loves this strategy. It also increases the consistency of decks by allowing you to dig for more engine pieces or even additional side deck cards as well. And on top of that, it definitely boosts the power level of decks, giving you access to powerful bodies on the board for either Link, Synchro, or Xyz material. It's an amazing card, but is it even one of the top 3 cards from Age of Overlord the set it was released in? I don't know, you'll have to wait and see. At number 7 is Chaos Angel, easily the most expensive card from Cyberstorm Axis and definitely the most hyped card from that set. This card is absolutely insane, being a generic card in the extra deck that pretty much any light or dark based deck can make. The card kind of breaks the Synchro mechanic because you don't actually need tuners to summon it out, which is so strong. Being a generic level 10 Synchro is great because you get a free banish off of it, and on top of that, if a light monster was used to summon it out, it's immune to monster effects, and if a dark monster was used to summon it out, then it can't be destroyed by battle as well, and that applies to all your Synchro monsters monsters too. There are so many strategies that try and take advantage of this card because of its amazing star line. Being level 10 is great because you can make it easily in Labyrinth with either Lady or Lovely Labyrinth and something like Stovey Torby. You can also make it with Arius and Ariana. On top of that, in Dragon Link strategies, it's easily made. In Bystial Stun, those kind of decks, it's great to make this card as well as just spot removal. The card is being used as a big red emergency button, but honestly, that's fine. That's how the card was intended to be made. It wasn't made to be a card that's going to boost consistency of a strategy. So for that reason, I'm not too worried about it. It's definitely had competitive success and it's seeing a lot of play in many different decks. And I want to put it higher, I really do, but I don't think I can right now. It's also a debate whether or not it's the best level 10 synchro in the set that it even came out in. Coming in at number 6 is Bystial Dis Pater. I knew this card was going to be broken once it came out, but it took a little while for the entire competitive community to kind of notice that. But the card is absolutely insane. Everyone realizes it now. It has a home in so many different strategies, raised the ceiling, has negates or destructions, extension, all these different things on a level 10 dragon body that is dark as well is insanity. And because it shares the Bystial name, it also gets access to all the support they share as well. The deck is seeing a ton of play in any Bystial Synchro branded Synchro list as well as Dragon Link in general. And on top of that, it's one of the key pieces in the end board for Vanadium as well, which is one of the best combo decks of the year. A lot of the time, decks are deciding not to go with Baron as their level 10 synchro of choice. They're going with Bystial Dis Pater instead, which is a great option for so many different strategies. In my mind, you can make an argument for Bystial Dis Pater to be the number 5, 6, or even 7 slot on this list, but for the time being, it falls at number 6. At number 5, we have Guiding Quem the Virtuous. This card is our third card in a row from Cyberstorm Access, a set that really wasn't that impressive when looking back on it. But when we actually do take a deeper dive, 3 amazing cards at high rarities is also really good to see. This card is really close to my heart because it was an integral part to 2 of my favorite strategies for the entire year, being Bystial Synchro, of course, and being Branded. Both those strategies saw a lot of success in competitive play, depending on what variants you were playing. The card enables so much for each of its respective strategies, enabling Branded to stay relevant for well beyond its prime, and of course allowing Bystial Runic, Joshua Schmidt's list that won YCS Bologna, to top and win the event because this card was the best starter for the strategy. Of all the criteria I listed, it doesn't cover one of them. It's not a card that sees play in so many different decks, not a very generic card, but it definitely increases consistency of strategies by being an amazing normal summon and recurring resources back. It definitely increases the power because this on a branded board is absolutely deadly, and on top of that, it has seen competitive success in both branded and now in Bystial Runic. I also find it hilarious that the best cards in Yu-Gi-Oh this year range from like a really big cat to an actual fire hydrant to like these 2 giant behemoth monsters in Bystial Dis Pater and Chaos Angel to like a little girl lost in a foreign world in Quem. It's just hilarious to me. Before we move on to number 4, I just have to say that these 4 cards are definitely a tier, a cut above the rest of the cards I've already mentioned. They're without a doubt the 4 best cards of the year. So starting off with number 4, we have Wanted, Seeker of Sinful Spoils. Wanted is the second card on this list from Age of Overlord. And honestly, if you want to put Diabellstar here instead, I understand why, but there is no reason for it. Wanted is the best card in that engine and one of the best cards from Age of Overlord. The fact that it enables so many different decks to play their game at their best and highest potential is insane. It boosts consistency, it boosts power, and of course it has definitely seen a lot of tops, and we just mentioned that it's seen play in a lot of different decks that can take advantage of level 1 fire monsters. Let's just take an example. Let's look at Rescue Ace and at Fire King. Both of these decks really want to take advantage of level 1 fire monsters, whether it being with Ponix or with Rescue Ace Hydrant. Now with both these cards being level 1 fires, that's great and everything, but there are additional level 1 fires that the decks play to be able to boost their power level. Rescue Ace is playing Jet Synchron as a way to get access to Boreload Savage Dragon and Baron de Fleur, which are both 2 amazing negates for what the strategy tries to do. Now that isn't the most common way to play Rescue Ace anymore, but it is still a possibility to encounter over the course of a long tournament. And Fire King is playing Snake Eye Ash to get them access to eventually Snake Eye Populous for next year, but for right now they're getting access to Fire King Ponix from the deck, being able to increase the power of their boards and really make their end board a lot more threatening than it otherwise would have been. And as for competitive success, while Age of Overlord has only been out for 2 to 3 months, there has been so many tops using the Sinful Spoils card, including decks like Infernoble, which take advantage of this as well. There are so many good fire decks that really want to use the Sinful Spoils card, and Wanted is definitely the card to do it. Not only does it represent getting you access to any level 1 fire in your deck, but it also gives you a draw as well, which thins your deck out and allows you for additional consistency and boosting the power level of your strategy too. So all of that, and I haven't even gone to one of the best parts about it. The fact that it's a quick play spell is crazy. They could have made this card a just regular normal spell card and it would be so much worse because you would play into Droll just by having this card. Activate it, add the Diabellstar, Droll. Well, now the rest of your engine is kind of caught offline. Or use something else, then you get Droll, then you can activate Wanted as well. It's the fact that this card here can be used to play in the draw phase, the standby phase, to play around Droll is so strong. And when you're done with your Sinful Spoils combo, just banish it, recur resource, and draw a card. Absolutely insane. There is a reason why this card is at $100, and it's because Wanted enables so many different decks to be more consistent and powerful than they would otherwise be. Before we move on to our top 3, I want to shout out these 3 cards that didn't make the list but were very close. I want to shout out Revolution Synchron, Unchained Soul Lord of Yama, and Superstar Slayer Typhon Sky Crisis. All 3 of these cards are extremely powerful. Some were overhyped like Revolution Synchron, while Yama was underhyped, and Typhon arguably hasn't even reached its peak. These cards are absolutely insane. I just don't have room for 13 cards on a 10 card list. I also did briefly consider cards like Super Heavy Samurai Wakoshi, Excel Synchro Stardust Dragon, and Crimson Dragon, but they just weren't good enough to make this list. At number 3, we have Triple Tactics Thrust. Finally, a card from Photon Hypernova. This card is insane because it's a card that essentially represents every other normal spell and trap in the game, which is really, really good. And we aren't that far removed from a format where Triple Tactics Thrust was sitting at $90 US a copy for just the secret rares. God forbid the ultimate at $130 each. The card is flexible enough to be used as a board breaker to search for cards like Lightning Storm and Evenly Matched. It can also be used when going first to be able to get yourself additional combo pieces, or even cards that are just blowouts against certain strategies, like for example Dimensional Barrier. And one of the best interactions is getting Triple Tactics talent to be able to rip another card out of your opponent's hand. So instead of starting with 5 cards, they start with 3, which is insane. Even in some cases, it can be used as a way to start your engine. If you're going and using Triple Tactics Thrust, setting an Unchained Spell or Trap, for example, and then destroying it with like a Sharvara, for example, you're going to be able to plus off that, and that way Thrust becomes a starter for your strategy as well. It's also great to be used early on in the duel because your opponent really needs 2 interruptions to shut it down. If you use something, they hand trap you, for example, you then go Thrust to get something to hand and activate it right away, then you have a second card to be able to negate that card that you added to your hand, which can be really hard to do depending on what 5 cards they open up with. It is the one card on this list with the most flexibility of all of them, and on top of that, it arguably has the highest ceiling too, which is ironic because it's a card that right now is seeing most of their play in the side deck instead of the main deck. Anyways, I made my case as to why it's the 3rd best card of the year. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think about Triple Tactics Thrust? At number 2, we have SP Little Knight. Yeah, a shock to be sure. You guys probably thought SP was going to be at number 1, didn't you? Well, look, this card is insane and definitely has an argument for the number 1 card in Yu-Gi-Oh! For 2023, but a few things are holding it back in my opinion. The biggest thing holding it back is while it definitely is one of the best cards ever printed, it's not even the most impactful card of the year, and we're going to get into that in just a bit, but let's talk about what SP does so well. Well, firstly, it is one of the most generic and best forms of removal in the history of the game. Requiring any 2 effect monsters to summon it out is great, so you have a recurring way to just banish resources that your opponent has. On top of that, if you use an extra deck monster to summon it out, you get a free banish from your opponent's field or graveyard, which is really strong as well. We know it's a strong card, this format, for all the obvious applications it has, but what about the other more niche tricks that the card can do? Well, if you're going up against an opponent, you create a massive end board with a bunch of negates and SP Little Knight, and your opponent goes activate Evenly Matched, you chain SP Little Knight, you banish itself, you banish whatever copy you had, like a Barone, for example, and then you bring it back in the end phase, and at least at that point, you have 2 additional interruptions to try and break your opponent's board when the turn comes back to you. On top of that, speaking of the Barone, if we banish a Barone that's already used the effect and bring it back, then it gets negate again, which is so critical because Barone having only 1 negate while it's on the field is really, really unfortunate. And on top of that, just having the threat of Little Knight can be absolutely terrifying because it's so generic that almost every single deck can take advantage of it, and people have to play around it or they're going to be in a really bad position. Getting into SP Little Knight wars about whose SP is going to resolve first can also be an impactful point in how a game will actually end up going. So you really want to make sure that you're playing SP to the fullest potential, and for that reason, a lot of people are actually deciding to play it at more than 1 copy in the extra deck if they can actually afford it. But the card is pretty expensive, sitting at like $115 per copy right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if it kept going up before the tins reprint it. It finds its way at number 2 on this list because it's so generic, powerful, and game warping, and on top of that, it definitely has a lot of competitive success to show for it. But let me know, where would you put SP Little Knight on this list? And at number 1, I'm going to give you 3 seconds to guess what it is. 3, 2, 1. Well, if you haven't guessed it, it is Kashtira Arise-Heart. Yeah, this card came out this year. Photon Hypernova released Arise-Heart, and this card changed the game. It warped the entire meta around it because of how strong this card is. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if you thought number 1 might be something else, but the card itself has been banned for 3 months, so you might have forgot about it at least a little bit. But the card changed the way that we played Yu-Gi-Oh! For basically the entirety of its lifetime. It's a walking macrocosmos on a massive body. It has ways to recur resources from the banish zone to attach to it as material, and once it has those 3 material, it's a target banish face down, which will then trigger its effect again to attach another material to it. It is so strong. This card really warps the way the game was played for so long, and it invalidated so many different decks, including the best archetype of all time in Tearlaments. That deck was unplayable because we had access to this card in the format. We banned Kashtira Arise-Heart, and then what happened? Tyr came running back into the format as one of the best decks in the game again. That's the power of Kashtira Arise-Heart. There are tons of other decks that were just completely disregarded and abandoned because of Kashtira Arise-Heart's existence. And listen, we banned Kashtira Arise-Heart, and Kashtira went from being the best deck in the world to being a rogue deck at best. People were siding in and maining Book of Moons and Book of Eclipses just to specifically deal with Kashtira Arise-Heart because they couldn't just effectively deal with it in other ways. The card is one of the most oppressive boss monsters in the history of the game, and while it did come out before all the other cards on this list except for Rescue Ace Hydrant, the card is definitely the only card on the ban list at the time of recording, which is saying something. And for that reason, I definitely believe that Kashtira Arise-Heart is the #1 best Yu-Gi-Oh card in 2023. And that is it, the top 10 best Yu-Gi-Oh cards released in 2023. Now let me know down in the comments, what is your list looking like, and did I miss any cards? Also, let me know down in the comments what you thought of the video itself. I'm always looking for ways to improve the content here, so I would love to have your input. Remember, if this video hits 150 likes, and I'll bring you a complete guide to cards that everyone needs for competitive Yu-Gi-Oh in 2024. Speaking of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, I just released my guide to the best hand traps in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh. That video is right over here. And finally, subscribe to the channel for more amazing competitive Yu-Gi-Oh videos and to help us reach our new goal of 5,000 subscribers. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time.